Welcome to another edition of the Phillips Wealth Council podcast. My name is Greg Phillips, and my guest today is Chris Johnston. Chris is a real estate agent who specializes in the Toronto Upper Beaches and East York regions, where he's lived for more than 10 years. Prior to that, he spent over a decade in the bar industry and 20 years managing the operations of a national advertising firm. Chris has learned from his experience that the secret to a great client experience is not only paying attention to what people say, but what they don't say. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate you having me on.
Not a problem. How are things in Hogtown?
Pretty good. I mean, the summer typically is somewhat slower, but I've been very lucky since May on that I've been pretty busy, so I can't complain at all. Hoping for it to wrap it up in the fall.
Very good. And as we know, the real estate market has been on another tear. It's been going that way for 10 years, and the last year and a half to 2 years has definitely been up. I read this morning some report from Remax that said prices were up again. The average price in Toronto was 1.1 million or something. So yeah, I guess it's a good place to be right now if you're a good business or industry to be in.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially, I mean, being a buyer, it's a little bit tougher because there's not as much supply still yet, but there is supply.
Right.
But obviously from a seller's point of view, depending on what you're aiming to do, whether you're selling and moving out of town and cashing in, it's a great opportunity. But if you're selling and also looking to stay in the same pocket, it's a little bit tougher.
Right. Kind of a horizontal move is the more challenging one. Why don't we start with, I gave a little bit of information about your background, but why don't you just kind of elaborate on that a bit? We'll start with that, and then we'll get into kind of more industry type questions.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been in the business now for 7 years, ongoing. And before that, I was obviously in the advertising world from the operational side, running the operations for, New Ad Media, as well as Media City, Media Alternatives, but also worked in the bar industry. So coming from that perspective, before I got into real estate, I was coming from a strictly customer focused side of work, which is I think benefited me going forward. Obviously, once I decided to jump ship out of the advertising world, it wasn't it's not, I wouldn't say it's for the faint-hearted. It definitely is something that you have to keep working at. Anybody that believes that they can just jump into this and be making a killing, I mean, there's probably the odd person that can do it, but I mean, it takes, a good 1.5 to 2 years just to kind of get your feet wet, get rolling, get your client base down, learn the ins and outs of the business itself, learn all the documents,
right,
and going forward from there.
Yeah, and as with a lot of things, people only tend to focus on the end result or the end benefit, and they don't realize about, like you mentioned, a lot of the legwork and homework and just discipline required behind something to end up at that point, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
No, and especially if you could be as book smart as you want, but once you get out there in the real world and meeting people face to face, it can be very daunting. So you have to be kind of open to both sides of it. Obviously now, and the last couple of years, it's been more somewhat not face to face. And more, everything's online, but now that everything's opening up, like we've got open houses now that you can go to. We've seen a huge uptick in amount of people now willing to go out and see homes when an open house is available to be seen. It's actually quite impressive, and actually the numbers are pretty staggering in some of the ones in our area that I've seen that have had open houses.
So that's people going physically to these open houses.
Yeah. So example of that was like a week ago, I had a coworker have an open house for her listing, and she had 60 people per day.
Wow.
Everybody followed the COVID rules. Everybody lined up. They all filled out the questionnaires. Everybody was screened. They had to show all the proof of vaccinations if they had them on them. But everybody was masked, gloved, very cordial towards each other. But the numbers in 2 days was crazy. So 120 people through a house in 2 days.
That sounds like a ton to me, but I'm not in your industry. Like, what would just a good day be?
On an open house, I mean, it's all based on people's comfort level. I mean, if you have an open house now, I think, if you're getting, 20, in a normal open house, depending on the area and, you know, the price bracket and what you're looking for, is a good number. Anything over that, obviously you want to drive traffic, but it also is a comfort level for, you know, yourself as an agent, plus also what your customers are willing to allow.
Right.
In this case, you know, she was selling her own house, so it was open for her, and she had, you know, made sure nobody, you know, obviously everybody was out of the house.
Right.
But in other cases, it could change and alter depending on the comfort level of everybody else.
Wow. So obviously the market's hot. It has been hot for a while, and you know, we're hearing in the news that for younger buyers, there's concern whether they can get in. You know, even now it's challenging for them to get into the market, and obviously there's concern going forward about getting into the market. So, do you have any tips or advice that you can share with us for those younger buyers when it comes to that?
Sure. I mean, first out of the gate, I mean, based on everything right now, knowing what you can spend and what you can't spend is the biggest thing. Getting your pre-approval done. Going out and looking at homes is great, or condos or wherever you're looking for as a first-time homeowner. But if you don't know what you have in your pocket, you don't know what you can do, unless you're just happy going out there and looking and not being serious about anything, then by all means do it. But if you are serious, you need to know what you can and can't do. Working with a good mortgage broker in order to know, you know, who will be on hand if you need to call them is an added bonus, especially when you get into an offer night situation.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the comfort level of what you can't and can't spend. I mean, obviously nowadays, everybody is pricing them a little bit lower in order to drive the multiple offer situation. And knowing that, then you know what you should be allowed to do is very important. Nobody wants to overspend, and I think in most cases right now, you know, you look at what the final numbers are, and in the grand scheme of things, they're all coming in where they roughly should be. And if you have an agent that's doing their homework and doing a proper, you know, market analysis prior to an offer night, being open with your young clients and saying, you know, this is where I believe it should land. Let's see what happens. Now, there are other factors that can lead into, you know, there's always going to be somebody that comes in and, you know, they could have lost out on 20 offers and it's an emotional purchase, and they come in and they're way above everybody else. And sometimes you can't compete with that.
Right.
Shopping within your limits is important too. Making sure you're comfortable, you know, afterwards, avoid impulse purchases. You know, are you doing it just because you want in, or is it like, have you done your homework? Have you walked the area? Have you found out what schools are important to you if you're there yet? Do you have a car? Do you need to have a parking spot? Are you close to the transit line? I mean, all these things as a young buyer are important. Some people, you know, they want the downtown and they don't need a car. So you will save a little bit of money if you buy places that don't have parking, because obviously that is a big ticket item, especially in downtown Toronto, because those spaces are limited.
Are those, sorry to jump in there, Chris.
Sure.
I'm assuming as a expert in that area, these are things that you help guide people through.
100%.
As long as
100%.
having that initial conversation with them to say, what are the things you're looking for? Schools, parking spots. That's why they would come to you, because you've done that homework. You know the areas, and you can guide them properly versus them trying to do it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, it can be so overwhelming and daunting. And I mean, obviously with everybody's work schedule these days, having an agent that is going to guide you through that process, sitting down with you, going through your checklists, you know, your needs, your wants, your must-haves. Everybody's going to have a couple of must-haves. Somebody's going to have, well, I kind of want it, but I don't need it. Those are things important to know before you go out and look. And also taking them out and showing them a lot of the places and getting comfortable with your clients. I mean, a lot of the time what I try to offer is, you know, let's go out and see a bunch one weekend. Not saying, you know, you're going to love them. You may hate them all, but at least I'm going to get a sense for what your eye is going to catch and what you kind of want. And then I can go out from there, you know, during the day and say, look, I saw this house. I think it's worth by to have a look. And I can go out and scout them for you, which helps so that, you know, you're not having to, you know, if you've got your kids or, you know, you've just got a crazy work schedule. I think that's a huge bonus from what I like to provide as a, you know, for my clients, so that it makes their transition a little bit easier and more comfortable into knowing kind of who they are and what they want. And I think that's important.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Like, and is definitely a value add where you're like, let's just look at a number of houses. and maybe you're getting one or two things from each of them for that client that they picked up on, like they like the kitchen, they like the backyard, etc. And you're making notes on that, so that then later when you go search for that perfect home for the person, those are the criteria you're looking for. You find that the one with the backyard and the kitchen, where in the past maybe they only had the backyard but not the, you know, those kind of things I think are definitely value added.
Sure, yeah, and you start with a wide spectrum, and then you slowly just narrow it down until like you're like, okay, like even it could be the area. You're like, oh, this house looks great, but then you show up and behind your house is a train track.
Right.
It wasn't on the listing, right? You don't know these things until you're out there, so you have to get a feel for the areas, especially if you're not comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm.
Another option I would say for a lot of I know a lot of younger first-time homeowners, kind of from what I found over the years, kind of want everything done. They don't want to have to do any work to the house, and that's totally fine if that's what you want. You will pay a little bit more for that. But there are also opportunities out there with older homes where you walk in, you're like, okay, you know what? I see the potential. So there could be opportunities where those houses are going to be a little bit less on the grand scheme of things, because not everybody wants to fix her upper.
Right.
But there could be an opportunity in there. And if you see the bigger picture to turn it into something down the road, because you know you're not going to be leaving for a while, then that could be something to look at as well. And I think that's important for younger people to look at down the road.
Definitely. So I would probably fall into that bracket where you'd really have to do some convincing and say, Greg, have you ever, I know you're not going to do the renovation because I know you, but you could hire someone to do the renovation. And this is what it might look like if you do this or that. And obviously providing that insight and viewpoint is definitely valuable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
I think a lot of people like myself would walk in and you just immediately might go, don't like it, but they don't see the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, like the house we're in now, for example, we bought this in the middle of winter 11 years ago. And, every room had different color carpets. Everything was kind of like, very sectioned off. But at the grand scheme, we're like, you know what? This had the perfect size for where we wanted to see it. And we've been here ever since. And that was 11 years ago. Yeah. And we just chip away at it. I mean, we're not going anywhere anytime soon, but we saw the potential. And I think that's important to, look at the potential down the road. And this area is now based on that. We're glad we did, because it's, it's exploded with the walkability factor, which is huge for us.
Right. Yeah. And that's, some people just can't see beyond what they see. And that's where people like yourself come in, right? I remember years ago looking for a house, and I still remember this house. The house was nice, but every single room in it was purple, like a dark purple. And I just remember it as the purple house. I don't remember, much more than that, but having someone like you saying, hey, look, changing the paint's going to change how this house looks, and, not that I didn't know that, but those are the things where you sometimes have to look beyond, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, those are small cosmetic things in my mind that, can, brighten it up, paint it all white. All of a sudden the room looks 10 times bigger.
Right.
And it doesn't take much to do it. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars right away if you've got the space and it's livable.
Right. Okay. I know in my business that, a big part of people's decisions, emotion and comes into it, fear and greed. Everybody knows that in the financial services industry, fear and greed dictate a lot of decisions. Have you found that in your industry and your role, that emotion comes into play when people are making decisions? Sometimes they just get fixated on one home, and maybe they're going to potentially enter into a situation where they're going to buy something that's beyond their financial means or their personal requirements. And how do you deal with that if that's the case?
You have to take one step at a time. By this time, you've probably been with, hopefully with your clients a little bit longer, so kind of how the situation works and kind of where they are and what their needs and wants are. And it's really sitting down and saying, look, hey, I get it. If this is the one you think it is, then by all means, let's do it. But also let's look at the other scenarios that could happen. You may not be the only one that's going on this house, so you have to be prepared that you may, because this is the one you want, Nothing wrong with that. If you feel comfortable and you know that you can do something and you're okay with, you know, going into those competitive things and you know, paying way more because that's the house, then that's okay. But you have to be aware that you may still not get it. And it's being honest with those people and saying, you know what, are you okay with not getting it?
Right.
Are you okay with this? Are you okay with, you know, not having everything that you want? Or maybe this one is the one you want. It's sitting down with them and just being real with them. I think that, you know, just to say, let's do it, and this is what you should spend, and this is where it's going to go. That's, you know, that's where it sometimes starts, but I don't think that that is realistic from my perspective, at least. I like to be a clear option and give people the worst case scenarios, because I think that's important for people to know.
Sure.
Just to say, let's do it is one thing,
Yeah.
but let's play the hard. You got to play the, you know, the bad cop and say, well, like, okay, this is my opinion, but I mean, obviously we're going to work on this together, but you need to know the other side of it as well. And
Right.
It may be hard to hear, but I think at the end of the day, even though they may hate you because you say it off the bat, when everything comes around, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, I think they appreciate your honesty based on that, on getting the hard facts.
Right. It sounds like you really spend a lot of time developing not only what people's needs and goals are, but also developing a relationship with them to understand who they are and how they make decisions. And I think you just said it, you're not afraid to tell them, look, I've done my analysis on this home and here's the range of what it really is worth. And if your emotions are going to guide you beyond that, then I'm going to tell you that it's not worth what you're paying. But as long as you're comfortable, then, you know, obviously you'll help them, but you're not just letting them pay whatever without some input.
100%. And I mean, a perfect example of that, we had an offer on a house in Ancaster like about a month ago, and it was the same kind of scenario. We knew there was going to be multiple offers. We knew that this was going to happen. I said, look, based on, you know, our like on the market value in that area, this is where it should fall. We ended up getting it, and they were like, okay, we can go a little bit higher. We know that we're probably overpaying, but we know we're not moving any further. And I even after all that analysis, I left it up to them and said, look, I'm telling you, hey, I want you to be comfortable in the decision. I'm not going to force your hand to do it. Here's where I think it should go, but here's where you need to make that decision. And if you're okay with it, then we'll move forward. And they end up moving forward. But that was their decision, which I wanted them to make.
Sure.
I didn't want to feel that I was pressuring them to go higher just to go higher. I wanted them to say to themselves, no, you know what? We love this house. We're okay with paying a little bit more. And it ended up working. But I wanted them to take that step to realize that that was their decision. And it ended up working out.
That's great to hear, because obviously, whether it's your industry or my industry or whatever industry, there's always individuals that are maybe going to put their own interests above those of the customer or the client. And it sounds like you keep, you know, the interests of your client are the motivating factor. You're helping them. And
absolutely. And as you know, I mean, this is, you know, the biggest purchase everybody's ever going to make, whether it's your first, your second, your third. It's always going to be the biggest one. Right. So you have to be just honest and straightforward and kind of guide them as much as you can. And at the end of the day, they're going to say yay or nay. And I want them to make that decision with all the information. If you provide them all the information, then they can make their own decision based on that. And you're there to help them to get that. Makes
sense. And both in your industry and my industry, that approach is never going to fail you as a professional, for sure.
No, and I think, I think that's all you can be. If you can be true to yourself and just be honest with people, I mean, it's not going to work for everybody. Some people don't want to hear it, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. They may not end up using me, but I'm okay with that, knowing that I gave them all the information. If what I'm providing and what I'm telling them and what I'm doing based on my knowledge, if that isn't enough, then that's okay. I'm okay with that. I've learned to accept that. Yeah. And they may want that the agent that, you know, is the crazy bully, and you know what, that's okay. I'm okay with that. If that's, then hey, go with it. Right. But just being honest over the years and getting better at this and learning through the whole process, I've never had anybody really go that way. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with
And
it.
we've had on our side in our industry, we've turned away clients whose expectations are just unrealistic, and you stick to what you know as a professional, and that I think that's the best road to travel. There's something you mentioned a while back that I wanted to come back to. You mentioned about pre-planning and mortgage brokers and things like that. Do you have a network of mortgage brokers that you work with that if your client wants to be referred to someone, or is it something you leave up to the clients to deal with on their own?
I do have a network of people that I can recommend, whether it's mortgage brokers, contractors, and all that. If they have had somebody that they've worked with in the past, I do recommend that they stick with them because they know them.
Right.
But there are cases where somebody hasn't had to do an offer on a property or had to go through this process in 20 years. The person they had 20 years ago or even longer could be gone.
Right.
So they don't know. So unless they know, so then in that case, then yes, I lead it over to them. I will provide them just like you would do if you get it, work done in your house.
Mm-hmm.
You go with, 2 or 3, and you get a vibe for who they are. And you leave it up to them and you guide them. That's all you can do. I'm not a mortgage broker. That's not what I do.
Right.
But I could be like, hey, I use this person with my house, or
Mm-hmm.
I know that they've done this, but I want them to also make the decision and feel comfortable with them as well. Same with lawyers.
Sure.
Same idea. Closing lawyers, whatever it is, wills and estates lawyers. You have to, as a client, you have to be comfortable with them for that process. And that's the same thing with agents. Same thing with anything, really.
Yeah, because it's all relationship driven, so it totally
100%.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears now, and we talked about the young buyers trying to get into the market and the concerns there. At the other end of the spectrum, you have older clients and people that are looking to sell and downsize. What sort of advice can you share with them in this, current market or markets in general?
Yeah. The older market is there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of just same thing as younger, but it's a different scale, right? The youngers and the olders, whether you're just buying your first house or haven't done an offer on a house and never had to do anything in 40 years,
Right.
it can be just as daunting. Back in the day, everything was done via let's get a piece of paper and write everything down. Everything is done by hand. Whereas now a lot of the technology is taken over. You're getting everything done via DocuSign. So when you get into the older spectrum of clients who are looking to either, they're empty nesters now, the kids have moved on, they've had the same house for 50 years. It's the same process. It's just a little bit different because they're adults and they're older and they don't know. They could have tons of stuff.
Right.
A scenario where they're like, what do we do? We've got a 5-bedroom house. The kids are gone. It's way too much for us. What do we do? Then we go out. It's like, okay, well, then we have to break down the same idea. You have put together a list. You're like, do you want to have a bungalow? Do you still want to do, maintenance on the property? Do you want grass? Not everybody wants that when they want to downsize. They're like, look, we did that for 50 years. We don't need to do that anymore. Why don't we go into a condo? But then there's that side. Then you get into, well, there's some great lifestyle condos that are geared for clients that are 50 plus that have, obviously you pay your maintenance fees.
Right.
They're larger units, they're lower rise, and everything's taken care of. They have, on-site, pools and amenities and all that. So, there's a million scenarios to have to work with that. And it's really the same thing as you do with a younger client. You have to take them out because they haven't had to look in 50 years.
Right.
And there's just so much of it. And if you know the areas and what it is, and also talking to past clients that are older and saying, hey, do you love your building? You're like, hey, do you mind if I bring a client through? You can talk to them. That also helps to guide them and also gives them some comfort. Okay, all right, well, maybe this will work.
They get a live experience. Yeah.
A lot of experience. And the same thing. Yeah. It's the same thing as you do if you have contract. If I'm getting contract work done, if my contractor is able to show me, 6 properties that he's done work, and I can go in and see those people and talk to them and ask them the questions I need to do. You can do the same when you're buying properties.
Right.
And if you have a good relationship with the people you worked with in the past, more than not, they're going to be like, absolutely, come on through. Bring your clients in. I want to tell them about the property or the condo or wherever it is and go from there.
That'd be
Um,
like a firsthand experience is like a great, like, I think it's a great idea, right?
yeah,
Go in here and hear firsthand from people what,
check it out.
yeah,
Yeah, and you'll probably be able to get into more, like, if you get into one of those condos, you're actually now going into a full unit, talking to the owners, talking to the property manager group, like going through it, and not just going through and booking a half-hour showing. You're actually going further into detail to find out more about it. How was their first year there?
yeah,
Like, well, this was, okay, but they handled it well, or it's been great. If there's any issues that comes up, they fix it in a day. Like, those
yeah,
are important things, especially when you're an older client downsizing, looking to move somewhere. You don't want to have to deal with all that stuff. You
sure.
dealt with it for so long in your own house. It's like, that's the last thing you have to worry about.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most common things I hear. People just want to get rid of um, the stuff that they were doing for 30 years or 40 years, right? Like all the maintenance. They want it to be more turnkey solution.
Yeah, and the even more daunting side of it sometimes is, like, you've say you had a house that was 5 bedroom. You can't take everything you have from a 5 bedroom house and move it into a 2 bedroom condo.
Yeah.
So guiding somebody through that, which we do as well. We've got, we work with downsizing companies. We work with all those sides of it. We come in and we kind of evaluate, because it can be overwhelming.
I was just talking to a client of mine yesterday. She's moving from Mississauga, Oakville area down to London, and 45 years in the house. And she said it's just been crazy, right? Packing stuff and trying to
Yeah.
figure out what they can take and can't take and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, do you donate? Do you give some away? Does your family want some? I mean, there's a million things that it can be very overwhelming. So to have people that can help you through that, it can definitely help, because it can be all, it's like, nobody wants to get rid of stuff.
Yeah.
But if you haven't worn it in a year and a half or whatever it is, then you're probably never going to wear it.
Now people have heard kind of, it's a totally different topic, but there's big demand for like recycling clothes, right? There's some
Yeah.
businesses popping up where people, because rather than just go out and buy new all the time, they're saying, well, just like you said, I've had this and I kind of go to this whatever store and then I'm getting something that's only been worn 4 times, and I'm kind of donating my stuff that I've never worn, and people are kind of getting it, like those businesses are starting to come to the forefront. So
Yeah, there's all the vintage pop-ups.
is there anything you wanted to add on that last kind of topic we were discussing, or?
No, I think it's just yeah, I think at the end of the day, whether you're new or old, and depending on the situation, it's really just sitting down and ironing out what you need and what you want, and listening, and really knowing what you can and can't do. And I think that's the biggest thing, and just being honest with everybody and just being open, not hiding anything. And just, last thing you want is to find out something last minute that you didn't know before.
Right. So from your standpoint, doing your homework with your clients, finding out their needs, objectives, very similar to what I do, doing a lot of listening, communicating well, being fully transparent about the process. All those things are very key, I think, both for you as a professional, myself as a professional. One thing I wanted to before we part company, I wanted to read a quote from you to our listeners or viewers. So I do have to read it here because I can't remember it exactly, but
Right.
it says, for buyers, it's about being on their side and offering guidance so there are no surprises. For sellers, it's about understanding why they're selling and what they need to get out of it. Sometimes it means telling people what they don't want to hear, but in the end, they're thankful for my honesty. And I know you said that earlier, but that's the actual quote from you. So I thought that was very profound.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it speaks true to who I am, and I think it's important for people to know going into working with me that that's how it's going to be. Like, I don't want to hide anything. I'm going to be very upfront, and I want them to be okay with that. And I think if you start with that, then there's no reason why you can't, work with that all the way through. If you're not like that from the day one, it can be difficult. Like, I think it's just being open and honest and being over communicative.
Yeah. Sounds like your clients are in good hands and working with a really good person and an honest person. So Chris, I want to thank you for your time today, being on this podcast. It's always a pleasure, always good to see you.
Good to see
And
you.
good luck. Hopefully the real estate industry keeps moving, I guess, regardless of whether it's going up or down, there's always business to do. But you can link up with me on LinkedIn. This will be posted on YouTube as well, our YouTube channel. Leave your comments. We'll post it on SoundCloud as well. And if you ever want to be put in touch with Chris, you can contact me, or obviously his contact information will be on the podcast as well. So take care, and everybody have a good day.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right.